Domain's predicting a bumper year for property in 2020. Let's have a look. Good morning everyone, Florian Heise here and welcome to another episode of Heise Says. I've got my Saturday morning stein of coffee and I thought we would start the weekend by having a look at this article from Domain where they're arguing for that an increase in property listings may lead to a bumper year for property in 2020. Before we have a look at that, I'd like to jump over and look at a few other things we've discussed recently. Tradies in recession, and this is where I looked at an article written by Jason Murphy where he highlights the decline in ute sales, in new ute sales over the year, about 8%, as an indicator that maybe the tradies aren't doing so well. And if you combine that with the decrease in, building approvals over the year that have had an uptick before Christmas, which usually happens. You usually get a rush in a couple of months. Pretty quiet in the game. I know it's been mixed for us over the last few years as architects. Sometimes we've had a big project coming on board next year and we just work through the holidays just to get a start. But usually, everyone's on holiday. This is when you give the staff extra time off because it's quiet. No one wants to work or build. A lot of the construction that does happen over this period is a lot of education work to get the schools up and running prior to the next year, which makes sense if you're in that sector. But as an architect, it's highly competitive. And fees are bloody cheap. So we looked at that one. And before that, Deutsche Bank was one of their top 20 concerns or risks for the global financial market was a housing crash in Australia. That's another, that's a sign. I know everyone has their opinions on Deutsche Bank, but they're raising, at least admitting to that as a potential risk. So what does that mean is, maybe the government will pump more money into it. But we also looked at, just on the 19th of this month, just a couple of days ago, where property buyers were selling. Well, one gentleman sold out of an apartment in Sydney for over $900,000, a little too better, 60-year-old bloke, because of his concerns over what is happening, that a recession is coming and that there's a bubble. And it was funny that the real estate agent essentially agreed with him, but still thought the property was at a good value. I don't understand if it's going to decline in value. But, no, I do exactly understand. It's an agent, it's their job. So if you haven't seen those videos, have a look and keep that in mind when we go through this article from Domain. Keep that in mind. Now, let's have a look at this here. Rising listing numbers hint at bumper year for property sales in 2020. Okay, hint at. So there's another thing to consider. If you're a agent or a advertising portal for property, all you want is listings. All you want is listings so you can flip them. That doesn't necessarily mean that prices will go up. If people are jumping on now, maybe they're responding to the same situations that they're seeing in the market. Consumer confidence, it has taken a bump up, guys. It has taken a bump up recently, but it's still below 100. It's still below 100, or consumer sentiment. So, and just with rate cut after rate cut after rate cut, and the continued, lack of predictive ability of the RBA, are more people becoming astute? Are more people waking up and getting access to this information? Because think about it, in the past, years ago, it'd only be people who deep dive into it or subscribe to things or go to university. Now you've got access to all this data as well. I did a video yesterday about $1 million house in Sydney, a dilapidated house. And people were saying, forget about the train line, look at the aeroplane line, the aeroplane landing. Because I'm not from Sydney, I didn't realize. So I went and got the data of the where the flight paths are. I can map that now, and I'm starting to think some of that stuff would be good for people to look at. So if you have any things that you would consider in buying a property, let me know in the comments, guys, because I'd like to do a video compiling a whole lot of different little out of the way things, like airlines, like ground contamination, where you can get it, and restrictions, particularly in Sydney. It's a big thing. I'd also say the triangle of fail. If you're looking at buying within the triangle of fail, does that increase your risk of having issues with your apartment buildings, particularly if it's built between a certain year? It would certainly make me consider it. just because of everything I'm hearing and seeing. So yes, let's jump in and have a look at that. If you have anything to share with that, I'd appreciate it. Any ideas? There's no bad ideas on YouTube, guys. Well, I'm sure they are, but anyway. So, Melbourne's property listing numbers are starting to improve as more vendors return to the market in a bid to sell their homes before the end of the year. Sellers who were sitting on the fence during Melbourne's property downturn and early recovery are now listing their homes hoping that the slightly below average numbers of homes for sale will help them get a better price. SQM's researcher Louise Christopher said data revealed new listings, that is houses that have been listed for 30 days or less in any month, were on the rise, pointing to Melbourne's continuing house price recovery. Now, this is questionable. And I've had a look. I want to look into a bit of greater detail into the methodology that CoreLogic is using, their hedonic index, the hedonic index. Now, if you're not familiar, it's drawing from hedonism, okay? And I'll do a video looking at it in a bit greater detail, but essentially it's drawing from hedonism. And it's the ethical theory that pleasure, in the sense of satisfaction of desires, is the highest good and proper aim of human life. And they're arguing that as rational actors, people want to maximize their utility in their property purchase, so they pull apart properties and look at all the different components and stick them all together and give valuations to that. That's the methodology they're using. Fundamentally, it looks like they're basing it on hedonic theory. Hedonic theory, or theory of psychological hedonism, is the idea that human behavior is motivated by the pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain, or more accurately, displeasure. Its histories can be traced to the beginnings of Western philosophy. So we've got ancient philosophy being used to determine our property prices. And there are other schools of philosophy as well. I tend to take more interest and find more practical the Stoic approach to philosophy. And I'd imagine there'd be a whole lot of other people are. So maybe the reason why we seem to be getting bipolar messages from the media and different parties is you've got one camp here which are hedonistic. They're just seeking pleasure and it's all good. And then perhaps you have another camp which are a little bit more Stoic and can separate themselves away from what they can't control and look at it perhaps with a little bit more rationality. I don't know. Let me know what you think about that theory, guys. What do you think? I'm trying to understand why we're getting two arguments put forward. I mean, if you're in this hedonistic mindset, pleasure, yep, people will do that. Yeah, it's all good. Consume it. It's going to be great next year, guys. It's going to be great. And you can see how salespeople have to be like that. Have to be. So let me know what you think on that theory. I'll look into it a bit more and do a video on it, but I suspect there's something to it. I mean, just look at the differences in personality of the different characters that are putting stuff out. So, while it's improved from mid-year, historically speaking, new listings are still a bit below average for Melbourne, Mr. Christopher says. The latest figures for October show Melbourne has had 15,689 new listings for the month, only slightly down on the same time last year when 16,351 homes and units were listed for sale, SQM research data shows. The number had vastly improved since the start of the year when Melbourne's house prices reached their lowest point. The data showed that May, with 11,914 new listings, and June, with 9,472 new listings, were particularly weaker than normal, Mr. Christopher said. Months of uncertainty over property-related tax incentives in the lead-up to the federal election in May and tightening lending criteria from banks in the wake of the Financial Services Royal Commission had seen property prices in Melbourne plummet by 10% from the end of the year. Melbourne's house prices started to rebound in the June quarter, but listings have taken longer to return as vendors took a wait-and-see approach. Some vendors had held out for a better sales price, meaning that although new listings were down, overall listing numbers were higher than usual because houses had stayed on the market longer. But these longer-term listings were now beginning to sell, Mr. Christopher said. The overall trend, where listings are declining, is not because of fewer new listings, it's because older stock has been absorbed. but how long are they taking to sit on the market? In October, Melbourne's total property listings sat at 36,122, just below the same time last year. Of these, 8,996 properties have been on the market for longer than 6 months. That's a sign right there. How long this stock has to sit there. While the figure is up from the same time last year, it is significantly down from May, where 11,827 houses have been on the market for more than 6 months. Well, it's down. Would you call that significantly? From 11 to 8? Or 11 to 9? 12 to 9? 3,000? Yeah. 20%? Maybe 25? So, Melbourne listing numbers. So there we go. Listed for more than 180 days. It's half a year, guys. Half a year. This is the thing when we're getting these daily updates in property prices. It's interesting. I need to look at it a bit more because I question, since we're having product listed this long, I question the accuracy of the methodology. So, Fletcher's Blackburn director and auctioneer, Tim Heaviside, said a lack of stock was one of the reasons some vendors had decided to sell before the end of the year to take advantage of less competition from other sellers. There are only 4 big weekends left before Christmas, so we've seen more vendors willing to sell before the end of the year, Mr. Heaviside said. There's been a huge increase in listings for February and March next year. Marion and Andrew Sawyer are selling 2 homes they own in Rowell. One they've built on subdivided land. Listed them for auction December 7th. They decided to sell after seeing Melbourne's house prices recover. The Sawyers are now looking for a new home with a big backyard for their almost 4-year-old daughter to be able to enjoy. Timing-wise for our family now was the right time to sell because we're looking to move somewhere bigger, Miss Sawyer said. Ray White, Ferntree Gully's Josh Nosk, said the past 2 months have been particularly busy in Melbourne's southeast as the spring market kicked in and more vendors looked to sell. Throughout the year, the conversations were about vendors wanting to see what will happen. Now they want to sell before the year is out. Well, are they concerned that we may have seen a bounce and they want to get out before the market declines? And, guys, we need to have a look at some other concerning issues, particularly with arrears rates. They're climbing higher. So, the number of buyers still saw heavy competition despite the extra properties coming up for sale, he said. I think a lot of people want to go to Christmas and having bought something so they don't end up having to keep looking early next year, Mr. Nosk said. Domain economist Trent Wilshire said that Melbourne's price turnaround was seeing new listing numbers rise more quickly than the average for the time of year. What we're seeing over spring is that new listings are increasing at a faster rate than normal, Mr. Wilshire said. If prices continue to rise in 2020, which is looking likely, I think we'll continue to see new listings rise next year. What do you think, everyone? What do you think? Is it smart investors taking advantage of a perceived jump? Do you think prices will rise next year? What do you think about my theory about the Hedonic Index? Let me know your comments let me know your opinion in the comments below. I only have 1 coffee, guys. It's tiring in the morning. Like, share, and subscribe. If you enjoy my content and want to help me produce more, I do have a Patreon where you can make a small monthly donation. I also have affiliate links for eBay and Amazon, where I receive a commission and it doesn't cost you a cent. It's a great way for you to support creators on YouTube and other platforms if you're using those services. And finally, I have a PayPal where you can make a donation. Thank you to all the people who donated following our 10,000 subscriber special and all the people that joined. We've released our first ever merchandise. You can find that in the link below. It's handcrafted pocket squares, perfect for any occasion. Take care, guys. Have a good day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye for now.